single homeless mom lived in a poverty to educate her twin daughters. 30 years later, they returned with life-changing surprise. She lived in a cramped, run-down apartment on the edge of town for nearly a decade, working double shifts and studying by the faint glow of a single lamp, all to give her twin daughters a chance at a better life. 30 years later, those daughters came back with a life-changing surprise that no one could have expected. Emma Collins was once full of dreams. At 24, she had hopes of becoming a teacher, of building a safe, loving home for her family. But life had other plans. After losing her job at a local diner and then her small apartment, Emma found herself struggling against a tide of hardship most would have given up on. With her newborn twins, Lily and Grace, she settled into a tiny shelter that barely kept the cold out. The small space was dim and cramped, with peeling paint and a leaky roof. But Emma made it home. She juggled night shifts at a grocery store and early morning classes at the community college, fighting exhaustion and doubt. "I just want them to have what I never did," she whispered, tucking her daughters into a makeshift crib made from old blankets and cardboard boxes. Her days blurred into nights, filled with sacrifices she never imagined making. But through every hardship, Emma's resolve grew stronger. She studied lesson plans and child psychology on borrowed books, determined to give Lily and Grace an education that could break the cycle of poverty. This is the story of how a single, homeless mom's unwavering love and grit shaped the future of her twin daughters, and how 3 decades later, those daughters returned with a surprise that would change everything. Emma Collins wasn't always living in that tiny, crumbling apartment. Just a few years before, she had a steady job at a local school and dreams that stretched far beyond her neighborhood. Raised by a hard-working single mother in a modest suburban home, Emma learned early how important education was. She was the kind of kid who stayed late at the library, devouring books on everything from history to science, believing knowledge could be the key out of hardship. But life had its twists. After graduating college with hopes of teaching, Emma faced a series of setbacks, layoffs, a sick parent, and mounting bills. Each obstacle chipped away at her stability until she found herself on the edge, clutching tightly to the tiny hope that she could still provide a future for her newborn daughters. Despite her struggles, Emma's spirit never broke. She poured every ounce of energy into learning and working, even when exhaustion hit like a wall. Her nights spent washing dishes were followed by early mornings attending community college classes, all while raising Lily and Grace with a fierce, protective love. The pain of losing her previous life was buried deep beneath a relentless determination to rewrite her story, for her daughter's sake. One cold autumn evening, just weeks after Emma had moved into the cramped, run-down apartment that barely kept out the chill, her world shattered in a way she never expected. It started with a knock on the door, a neighbor, pale and trembling, whispering that the landlord was evicting them. The rent was overdue again, and with Emma's hours cut at work and bills piling up, there was simply no way to pay. Panic flooded through her as she held her babies close, their small faces pressed against her chest. The thought of losing the only shelter she had worked so hard to secure was unbearable. But the eviction notice wasn't the worst blow. Days later, after a long night of tears and uncertainty, Emma received a call that her mother had fallen seriously ill. Suddenly, the weight of her responsibilities doubled. Not only was she fighting to keep a roof over her daughters' heads, but she also had to face the possibility of losing the woman who had been her rock. With no family nearby and limited options, Emma was forced to make a heart-wrenching decision. She left behind the few belongings she owned and moved her daughters into a shelter. The cramped space was cold and noisy, but it was a roof, a temporary refuge amid the chaos. She juggled multiple jobs, from cleaning offices late into the night to early shifts at a diner, all while studying on worn textbooks, borrowed from the library. Each day felt like a battle. Every step forward met with a new challenge. Yet, even in those darkest moments, Emma's resolve grew stronger. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting to build a future for Lily and Grace, no matter the cost. That eviction and her mother's illness became the turning point, igniting a fierce determination that would shape the next 30 years of their lives. The eviction notice was just the beginning of Emma's downward spiral. As the cold nights grew longer, the tiny apartment's walls seemed to close in on her. With no savings left and job opportunities scarce, she found herself homeless, forced to take refuge in a cramped garden shed behind an old church. The shed was no bigger than a closet, its wooden walls thin and drafty, barely shielding her and her twin daughters from the biting cold. Every night after putting Lily and Grace to sleep on a tattered blanket, Emma lit a small candle and opened her worn textbooks. The flickering flame was the only light in that tiny space, and she studied by its trembling glow, determined to turn education into her ticket out of despair. Days blurred into nights as she juggled odd jobs, from cleaning houses to waiting tables, barely earning enough to buy food. One day, as she pushed a shopping cart filled with donated clothes, Emma received a call that her mother's health had worsened. Torn between caring for her own daughters and worrying about her mother, she felt the crushing weight of responsibility like never before. Yet, amid the exhaustion and heartbreak, she refused to give up. The cold shed became a classroom, the nights filled with whispered lessons and stories of hope. That life-altering period in the shed tested every ounce of her strength. It broke her down, but also built her up. The hardships forged a fire inside Emma, a promise that no matter the odds, her daughters would have a future she could only dream of. This crucible of pain and perseverance would define their story for decades to come. Emma's survival journey was a relentless battle against despair and exhaustion. Each morning, before the sun even rose, she would rouse her daughters from their thin blankets, wrapping them tightly in layers of donated clothes to shield them from the biting cold. The shed was small and cramped, but it was all they had, a fragile sanctuary against a world that seemed to turn its back on them. By day, Emma scavenged for work wherever she could find it, cleaning houses, washing dishes in cramped kitchens, sometimes even selling handmade crafts at local markets. Every dollar earned was stretched to its limit, carefully divided between food, school supplies, and small comforts for Lily and Grace. She refused to let her daughters see the full weight of their hardship, instead filling their days with stories, laughter, and lessons learned from tattered books. Nights were the hardest. When the girls finally fell asleep, Emma would light her solitary candle and study until her eyes blurred. The flickering flame became a beacon of hope, illuminating the pages of textbooks borrowed from the library and fueling her determination. Her mind raced with dreams of a better life, of breaking the cycle of poverty through education and sheer willpower. There were moments when exhaustion threatened to consume her, when the cold seeped into her bones and the loneliness felt unbearable. But each hardship only deepened her resolve. The neighborhood church and local charities became lifelines, offering small acts of kindness like warm meals, clothing drives, and tutoring sessions for the girls. Slowly, Emma built a fragile network of support around her, people who believed in her vision even when the world didn't. Through every setback and sacrifice, Emma held tight to her promise. Her daughters would not only survive, but they would thrive. The years in that tiny shed shaped not just their future, but the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children, a bond forged in hardship, but fueled by unshakable hope. After nearly a decade of relentless struggle, the turning point came, on a cold winter night when Emma felt she had finally reached her breaking point. The fragile walls of the shed, battered by rain and snow, seemed to close in on her. The bills had piled up, school fees were overdue, and despite her best efforts, the exhaustion was crushing her spirit. One evening, as the twins slept quietly, Emma sat alone, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the weight of uncertainty. But just when the darkness seemed impenetrable, a letter arrived that would change everything. It was from a local community foundation, an organization Emma had applied to months earlier for a small education grant. The letter confirmed she had been awarded full scholarship support for her daughters, covering their tuition and supplies for the coming years. It was the breakthrough Emma had been praying for, a sign that her sacrifices were finally paying off. This moment ignited a renewed fire within her. No longer was she just surviving. She was fighting for a future bursting with promise. With the scholarship in hand, Emma doubled down on her efforts, enrolling Lily and Grace in a better school, dedicating herself to learning new skills to find more stable work, and gradually repairing the shed that had been their home for so long. The breakthrough wasn't just financial, it was emotional and psychological. Emma's confidence blossomed, and the community that had watched her struggle now rallied behind her. Volunteers helped fix the shed, neighbors offered tutoring and mentoring, and slowly, the isolation gave way to connection. Years passed, and the seeds Emma planted during those harsh early days began to bloom in ways she had never imagined. Lily and Grace grew into confident, accomplished young women, their education opening doors that once seemed impossible. Both excelled in school, earning scholarships of their own, and eventually pursuing careers that allowed them to give back to the very community that had supported their family. Emma's story spread beyond the neighborhood, a beacon of hope for families trapped in cycles of poverty and despair. Local media highlighted her journey, inspiring other single parents facing overwhelming odds. Emma didn't stop at personal success. She used her newfound voice to advocate for affordable housing, education access, and support services for struggling families. She helped establish a nonprofit dedicated to assisting homeless and low-income parents, creating safe spaces where children could study and parents could find resources. The once crumbling shed became a symbol, transformed into a community learning center named Hope's Haven, honoring the resilience that saved her family. Emma's legacy was not just about surviving poverty, it was about transforming pain into purpose, showing that with determination, community support, and a spark of opportunity, even the most difficult circumstances can lead to extraordinary change. In quiet moments, Emma would reflect on the journey. From the cold nights in that tiny shed to watching her daughters graduate with honors, then thrive as mentors and leaders. The sacrifices, the tears, and the unyielding faith had forged a future far richer than any she had dared dream. Her family's story became a testament to the power of perseverance and the enduring impact one person's courage can have on generations to come. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?